Hi everyone, my name is Oliver, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Laci Rocha was born on May 4th, 1975, to her parents Sharon and Dennis. Her parents divorced when Laci and her older brother Brent were still young. During this time, Laci was introduced to her stepfather Ron, who would play a significant role in her life. Ron, a dairy farmer, became like a father figure to Laci and helped raise her as a child. Laci exuded a cheerful and outgoing personality. She was known for her infectious smile and bubbly nature, always eager to engage in conversations. Her talkative nature made her a natural attention seeker and thrived in social situations. Growing up with a stepfather who was a dairy farmer, Laci had a close connection with the outdoors. She spent a significant amount of time exploring and enjoying the natural beauty that surrounded her. One of her favorite pastimes was gardening with her mother. This shared activity became a source of joy and fulfillment for both. Laci's love for gardening would eventually carry over into adulthood, shaping her interest and career. Laci attended Thomas Downey High School as a teenager and was a cheerleader. Her role as a cheerleader suited her perfectly as it allowed her to showcase her outgoing and bubbly personality. She made a lasting impression on the school, becoming the ideal cheerleader. After graduating high school, Laci furthered her education by attending California Polytechnic University. There, she pursued a major in ornamental horticulture. Her interest in plants and wildlife led her to specialize in this field. During her time at Cal Poly, Laci spent a significant amount of time visiting one of her friends who worked in a restaurant in Morro Bay. It was there that she met Scott Peterson, her friend's coworker. Laci was immediately drawn to Scott and found herself smitten by him. Determined to make the first move, Laci decided to give Scott her phone number. Scott wasted no time in making contact with Laci. He called Laci, and to their surprise, they hit it off on their first conversation. After much anticipation, Scott invited Laci out on their first date. Laci and Scott's first date was a deep-sea fishing trip. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned for Laci. She became seasick during the outing. Despite the disastrous start, Laci and Scott continued to see one another. Their relationship grew more serious over time, and they decided to move in together. Before meeting Laci, Scott had dreamed of pursuing a career as a professional golfer. However, as their relationship progressed, his priorities shifted, and he made the decision to focus on a business path. In 1997, Laci graduated from Cal Poly. Scott graduated the following year. Their graduation marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, with their future seemingly filled with endless possibilities. On August 9, 1997, Laci and Scott exchanged vows in San Luis Obispo County's Avila Valley. The picturesque setting at a beautiful resort provided the perfect backdrop for their special day. Surrounded by their loved ones, they celebrated their love and declared their commitment to each other. Once Laci and Scott were married, they embarked on a new business venture by opening a sports bar called The Shack in San Luis Obispo, California. Initially, business was slow at The Shack, but over time, the couple began to see a steady increase in customers. The weekends were often packed with patrons. In 2000, after several years of successful operation, Laci and Scott made the difficult decision to sell The Shack. While the bar had provided them with a good source of income, they decided it was time to move on and explore new opportunities. After carefully considering their options, they finalized the sale of The Shack and relocated to Laci's hometown of Modesto, California. Laci and Scott purchased a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home in an upscale neighborhood. In October 2000, after Laci and Scott moved to Modesto, California, she took a part-time job as a substitute teacher. On the other hand, Scott was employed by a European fertilizer company branch. As a diligent and dedicated wife, Laci dedicated her time and efforts to be the best partner possible for Scott. She excelled in cooking, cleaning, and being attentive, ensuring their home was always warm and welcoming. In 2002, the couple received exciting news. They were expecting a baby. The pregnancy due date was set for February 10, 2023. Upon learning the gender of the baby, they excitedly announced that Laci and Scott were expecting a boy. They eventually settled on the name Connor for their little bundle of joy. On December 24, 2022, Scott claimed he left the house to fish at the Berkeley Marina at 9:30 a.m. According to Scott, Laci had a busy day ahead of her when he left. She was watching the talk show Martha Stewart, preparing to clean the floor, bake Christmas cookies, and take their golden retriever Mackenzie for a walk at the park. However, one of Laci and Scott's neighbors discovered Mackenzie outside her home around 10:30 a.m. The neighbor then walked Mackenzie back to Laci and Scott's house and left her in the backyard. When Scott returned home from fishing that afternoon, he claimed the house was empty. Mackenzie was in the yard, but Laci was nowhere to be found. Her car was still parked in the driveway. Scott said that after he got home, he showered and laundered his clothes, which he said got dirty and wet from fishing. After Scott stepped out of the shower on Christmas Eve, he noticed Laci was nowhere to be found. Growing increasingly concerned, he decided to reach out to Laci's mother and stepfather, Sharon and Ron. Unfortunately, neither had heard from her the entire day, leaving them both worried about her safety. As time went by and Laci remained missing, Scott and Sharon decided to report her disappearance to the police around 6 p.m. They emphasized to the police how crucial it was to find Laci, as she was 7 months pregnant with their baby, Connor. The police were questioning Scott about what he did and where he was on the day his wife disappeared. According to Scott, he went fishing at the Berkeley Marina, located approximately 90 miles from his and Laci's home in Modesto. However, the police would later say that from the start of their investigation, they had suspected foul play in Laci's disappearance. Despite this, during the initial hours after Scott and Sharon filed a missing person report, the police did not treat Laci's case as suspicious. As the search for Laci continued, Laci's family defended Scott to the outside world. Scott and Laci appeared to be an ideal couple, making it unimaginable for anyone to consider him capable of harming his pregnant wife. However, as the investigation into Laci's disappearance progressed, the police grew increasingly suspicious of Scott. Almost a month after Laci disappeared, the police made a shocking discovery regarding Scott Peterson. Through their investigation, they learned that he had engaged in 2 extramarital affairs and also had a long-term relationship with a woman named Amber Fry. While he was married to Laci, Amber Fry came to the police's attention when she contacted them on December 30th, 2002. She revealed that she had been having an affair with Scott. After she discovered that he was a person of interest in his wife's disappearance, Amber informed the police that she had first met Scott on November 30th, 2002, and had the impression that he was single. However, just 2 weeks before Laci disappeared, Scott told Amber that he was a widower and that this Christmas would be the first holiday season without his wife. Upon hearing this shocking information from Amber, the police began to wonder if it was an indication that Scott had already made the decision to murder his pregnant wife. In an effort to gather evidence against Scott, the police requested that she talk to him on the phone while being recorded. Their aim was to catch a potential confession on tape. The police told Laci's family about Scott's affairs. According to Sharon, Laci's mother, it was when the police showed her a picture of Scott and Amber together that she finally realized Scott was guilty of killing Laci. Several days after Laci's family learned about Scott's extramarital affairs, they announced that they would no longer support him. During the time Laci went missing, the search for her was extensive and involved various resources. Helicopters, police on horseback, K-9 units, bikes, and water rescue units on rafts were all utilized to help locate the missing pregnant woman. The involvement of not only the police, but also Laci's loved ones and many volunteers made the search for her even more comprehensive. Over 900 people showed up during the first 2 days to assist in the search. At a press conference, one of the police officers working on Laci's case expressed doubts that Laci had left her house on December 24, 2002, of her own free will. Laci's disappearance became a media sensation, and the story of a beautiful, devoted wife and daughter missing from her home on Christmas Eve was captivating for tabloids. The spotlight on Laci's case intensified as the public sought answers and speculated about her disappearance. After Laci Peterson went missing on December 24, 2022, a reward of $25,000 was initially offered for any information leading to her safe return. However, as time went on with no leads, the amount was increased to $500,000 in an effort to raise awareness and gather information. Posters of Laci were prominently displayed in Modesto, California. One of Laci's friend's husbands created a website to help spread the news. Several months after Laci Peterson disappeared, a couple walking their dog on April 13, 2023, came across a horrifying discovery in a marshy area of the San Francisco Bay at Richmond's Point Isabel Regional Shoreline Park. They discovered the decomposing body of a male infant. The following day, another person found the body of a pregnant woman on the shore of the east side of the bay shore. This area was approximately 1 mile away from where the baby was found. On April 18, 23, DNA tests confirmed that the bodies discovered were indeed Laci and her unborn son Connor. Laci and Connor were buried at Beewood Cemetery. The Associated Press would later reveal that during the autopsy, the medical examiner found 15 loops of nylon tape around the baby's neck, and a significant cut was on his body. According to the medical examiner, Laci had 2 cracked ribs. Her upper torso had been emptied of internal organs, and she was missing her head and limbs. During the autopsy, the medical examiner determined the baby died in utero and was expelled from Laci's body after she died. Agents from the FBI and officers with the Modesto Police Department conducted a search at the residence of Scott and Laci, seeking any evidence of their involvement in Laci's disappearance. This search revealed several intriguing clues, including a piece of hair found in Scott's pliers that he kept on his fishing boat. The FBI obtained a DNA sample from the hair and conducted further analysis. Laci was found to be a match. In addition to the search at their home, the FBI also thoroughly examined Scott's truck and warehouse. They sought any potential evidence linking Scott to Laci's disappearance. Furthermore, the FBI searched Scott's boat, where they discovered a homemade anchor. According to Scott, the anchor was made using a 90 lb bag of concrete, which he used to repair his driveway. However, the state believed that Scott had made 5 anchors and had used 4 of them to sink Laci's body in San Francisco Bay. The bodies discovered in the San Francisco Bay were later identified as Laci and Connor. This tragic discovery prompted the police to arrest Scott near the golf course. What raised eyebrows was the noticeable change in Scott's appearance when he was arrested. His normally dark brown hair was now blonde. Furthermore, Scott's vehicle was packed with items. The items found were $115,000 in cash, survival gear, camping equipment, 4 cell phones, and 2 driver's licenses. 1 license belonged to Scott, while the other was linked to his brother. This evidence suggests to the police that Scott was attempting to flee the state. However, Scott's father offered a different explanation for the driver's license. According to him, Scott had borrowed his brother's license in order to get a discount at the golf course. As for the reason Scott's vehicle was packed to the brim, his father claimed it was due to the media. Scott was reportedly living out of his car at the time to avoid the reporters camped outside his house. Scott's trial began 1 year after his arrest, in June 2004. During the opening arguments, the state presented its case to the jury, asserting that they knew Scott had killed Laci due to his affair with Amber Frey. The state emphasized Scott's behavior in the days before and after Laci was reported missing, highlighting inconsistencies in his statement to police on the day Laci was reported missing. Scott initially told police that he had been fishing, but later told people that he had been golfing. Additionally, the state pointed to Scott's request to the police if they had used cadaver dogs to investigate a park where Laci was supposed to walk their dog. The implication of this request was that Scott was already aware of the potential crime scene and was trying to cover his tracks. Scott's defense attorneys made a compelling argument in court during their opening statements. His attorney argued that just because Scott had a track record of cheating on his wife did not automatically make him guilty of her murder. They asserted that Scott would not sacrifice his entire life for someone with whom he had only 4 dates. Additionally, the defense put forth the notion that Laci's hair could have been found in Scott's boat due to a previous visit to the marina with Scott. During Scott's trial, 2 relatives of Laci's testified and said that Scott did not show any emotion during the time his pregnant wife was missing. A realtor also testified that Scott approached her in January, 1 month after Laci disappeared, trying to sell the couple's home. Additionally, a salesman testified that Scott traded in Laci's car after she went missing. To the state, all of this was evidence of Scott's guilt. Amber Frey took the witness stand and spoke to the court about her affair with Scott. The jury heard the secret recorded telephone calls between Amber and Scott, including one recorded after Laci disappeared in which Scott falsely claimed that he was in Paris when he was actually attending a vigil for his missing wife. During the trial, a hydrologist and an expert on tides of the San Francisco Bay testified that Laci's body could have been dumped in the area where Scott told police he was fishing on the day Laci disappeared. The defense in Scott's murder case argued that there was a lack of credible evidence linking him to the crime. They contended that someone had kidnapped Laci on Christmas Eve 22 and held her captive until she gave birth to Connor. Afterward, the killer disposed of both bodies in the San Francisco Bay. His attorney argued that there was no evidence to connect Scott to the crime directly and that other potential suspects could have been responsible. During Scott's trial, a juror was removed and replaced with an alternate juror due to misconduct. The dismissed juror had conducted independent research on the case, which is a violation of legal procedures. In addition to the juror being removed, the foreman also asked to be removed from the case. His request was taken seriously, and it was decided that his removal was necessary to maintain a fair and just trial. On November 12, 2004, a jury in California convicted Scott of 2 counts of murder. The charges were first-degree murder for the killing of his wife Laci and second-degree murder for the killing of their unborn son Connor. Laci's murder in particular was classified as first-degree murder with special circumstances due to the involvement of the fetus. This classification meant that Scott faced the possibility of the death penalty. After Scott was convicted of the murders, the penalty phase of his trial began. This phase of the trial focused on determining the appropriate punishment for the crimes. During this phase, the jury was required to consider various factors, including Scott's criminal history, aggravating circumstances, and mitigating circumstances. The jury unanimously decided that Scott should be sentenced to death. Following the jury verdict, the judge reviewed the evidence and affirmed the jury's decision. He determined that Laci's murder was cruel, uncaring, heartless, and callous. Because Scott was on death row, his sentence was automatically appealed. Consequently, his case was heard by the California Supreme Court. In June 2020, Scott's defense attorneys presented several arguments during the appeal. They argued that the prospective jurors were improperly excused, that the trial judge improperly allowed 2 jurors onto Scott's boat, and that the motion to move the trial to another county should have been granted due to juror questionnaire results, showing almost half of the prospective jurors had already concluded Scott was guilty prior to the trial. However, the state asserted that there was no evidence that a juror was improperly dismissed and no credible claim that any of the 12 jurors who decided Scott's fate were impartial. In August 2020, the United States Supreme Court upheld the conviction of death row inmate Scott, but overturned his death sentence. The following year, the judge ordered Scott to be resentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As a result of this decision, Scott was transferred from San Quentin State Prison, where he had been on death row, to Mule Creek State Prison in Ione, California. This transfer was in accordance with the judge's order. On April 1, 2024, President George W. Bush signed the Unborn Victims of Violence Act into law. During the signing ceremony, Laci's mother and stepfather were present, standing alongside President Bush as they witnessed the legislation being put into effect. This legislation, also known as Laci and Connor's Law, aimed to provide legal protection for unborn children in cases of violence committed against their mothers. The other recognized that an unborn child has a separate legal existence from his or her mother, making it a crime to harm or kill the unborn child while committing a crime against a pregnant woman. It recognized that an unborn child should be considered a victim of violence, deserving of the same rights and protections as any other person.